Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have a birthday card to share with you featuring the Parachute Pals and the Paint Strokes Stencil from my favorite things. Now for today's card I decided to go with a mini slimline card, so I created a mini slimline card panel and I'm going to use these paint strokes to get some color on top of this background coming in from the right and the left side of this panel. Another thing that I decided was to use a bit of pink, purple, blue, which I don't use often as colors on my cards, I know. So I decided to change that today and just have a bit of fun with these distress inks to help me with my background and later on with my Copics so that my images would match with the paint strokes that I was going to put them on. So I placed that one paint stroke where I wanted it to be and then I masked off all of the rest. Therefore, I just took a piece of paper and I ripped it so that I could place a piece on each side so that I wouldn't have any other smudges on my panel that I didn't want. And I started with picked raspberry. Next, I wanted a purple color, and although there are purples in the distress inks, I really love the purple that gets created by using picked raspberry and peacock feathers all at once. So I'm going to do that to create my purple today. And I decided to try each time to have it a bit darker on the edge where I'm blending than in the center of my panel. So on the right side you normally will see that my blending is a bit heavier handed on the right side, and on the left side of my panel my blending on the left side is a bit heavier handed. So to get my purple I'm starting with peacock feathers, and then I will use that picked raspberry again and go over it. Now to not contaminate my brush too much, I decided to just wipe off the blue excess ink on my stencil, and then I started blending the pink on top. And as you can see, that purple is easily created. Now next I'm continuing with that peacock feathers, and this way that purple is perfectly matching with the pink and the blue that is just above and underneath it. I'm also making sure that I'm changing every time the paint stroke that I'm using so that I have some different shapes on my background. So here again, a bit heavier handed on the right side this time and really soft towards the center. And I'm just continuing until I'm happy, and then my final color is chipped sapphire, which is a distress ink that I personally don't use often on its own. It's most of the time used when I create a night sky or anything like that. But today I am just going to use it individually on my card. I'm also making sure that the sizes of my brush strokes or paint strokes are each time a little bit different. I didn't want to have the idea of repetition or symmetric stuff, and just because the chipped sapphire was a bit really dark, I ended up also blending a bit of that peacock feathers on top to just lighten it a little bit. And then I had my background finished. So now it was important to figure out what I wanted to use as images, and I decided upon these 6 images. I will each time place 2 per stroke that I ink blended, and that way I will have a sort of 3 in several ways. You will see that later on. Now, for the critters, I decided to go really simple with my markers here. If you're curious later on to see which combinations I use, there is always a blog post where you can find everything really easily. That's just, I find it really handy. Like, I watch videos of several people, and then from time to time I recall when I'm crafting, like there was this gorgeous purple, and then I look whether that person has a blog post, and I'm hoping that I can find it there, because sometimes rewatching a whole video for that one combination might seem a bit crazy. You can always, but in case you have not enough time or anything like that, I definitely think that having a list on a blog post is really handy. So I'm reusing the same combinations for these adorable critters. I will also use this combination for the third one. No worries. I just wasn't sure about how I was going to do the shadowing over there, so therefore I just kept it a bit until I was sure about that. And since this one is like looking towards us, there were several ways. Of course, you can always do all the shadowing on the same side, so it could have been left. Since it's facing towards us, it could have been centered, the light source. But since I'm going to place this one on the right side of my panel, I decided to go with the same shadowing as I did with my blending, which means that on the right side I have the darker blending on the right edge of the panel, so therefore I have the same idea with the critters here. But the combination exactly the same. And then of course I just prefer adding a second layer if I need to, a third one, just to get that blend. You just keep going until you're happy with the blend that you have created. You can always add more layers if you're unsure about it. And with this layer I also tend to go a bit further with my darker markers because I know that I have the space to do that. With my first layer I'm most of the time a bit hesitant with adding too much because, well, it's easier to add than to remove dark colors. And then once these are finished, I decided to really look at the colors behind them to add the colors on top of the parachute, on top of the airplane, on the cloud, because I really wanted them to match with the background where they were added. So I don't do this often, but I decided for this card to add a few dots on the cheeks. I don't add any pinks to the cheeks because, well, I love seeing that and I think it's really gorgeous, but I always am afraid that I'm going to mess up. So I tend to not do that, and if I want to really emphasize the cheeks, I just add some white Jelly Roll pen to help me. So just 3 dots everywhere. It's really cute, I think. You can also use the white Jelly Roll pen, of course, for highlights, which is also something that I barely do, but also really pretty as end results. So here for the parachute, this one is going to be on top of my panel, so I have that dark blue over there, and so my parachute is going to be dark blue. Like that. If I have any boo-boos, I just use my colorless blender to get rid of them, and I sort of push that color back in where it belonged. You can go over it multiple times if you need to. And then of course here with the parachute I'm adding my second layer. It really deepens that blue in my opinion. I love it. So that's one image done. Many more to go. So next, after finishing, well, cleaning up my image, I am continuing with the purple. The purple, I say it often, this color family, for me personally, I find it really hard to blend, but this combination is a gentle one, if I can call it like that. From all the purple combinations that so far I can make with the markers that I have, this one sort of always works out. It's a soft one, the markers aren't that far apart from each other, which is also really handy. And I'm just working my way from darkest to lightest. And then for those other elements of the airplane, I will use parts of combinations so that it all matches together and it also matches with the background. Personally, I find really that the second layer makes a whole ton of difference than just one layer, but that's personal preference. So I'm just filling everything up here, taking my time. I'm also going to use this purple on the hat. You can change it up, but as I said, I wanted everything to match with the color behind it, so this one really needed the purples. And then of course the glosses. I was contemplating whether I was going to do a really soft glaze of like a bluish color to represent the gloss, but later on I will add glossy accents, so that way it is done by the glossy accents for me. So I'm not worried about it. I did, however, try to go a bit lighter with the coloring behind the glosses, just to show the difference. And then here, as I said, for these tiny elements of the airplane, I'm just using my lightest markers from the combination, as well as this Violet 01. And then for the clouds, I decided, however, to do exactly the same color on all of the clouds. The most important one was, of course, the one that is going to be on the peacock feathers, where that tiny critter is hanging off from. But all by all, it was really simple coloring. I just did a bit of flicking, trying again to do the same kind of shadowing for each part or each cluster of images. So everything on the left, shadows on the left, everything that will go on the right, shadows on the right. Now, if you're unsure about the flicking and just leaving it fading into the white area, you can always use your colorless blender to just have that the edges a bit more or smoother towards that white area, but that's all up to you, of course. And I'm really sorry that this image sort of was still out of sight while flicking, but I think you got what I did there. Now I'm taking the matching dies to cut all of these images out, and then we still have to make sure to add a sentiment. So for the sentiment, I am using the Let's Celebrate stamp set for my favorite things, and I'm going to white heat emboss this sentiment on the pink area. So all of the others will have critters, this one will have the sentiment. So I prepped my background here to make sure that my embossing powder wouldn't get stuck on areas that weren't intended for that. And then I'm just using my white embossing powder, super fine detail from Ranger. I don't have a lot of embossing powders. This one I got from the start and it works like a charm, so I keep on using it. And then it was time to place all of my images. I sort of wanted them clustered together to really have this idea that I have 3 images and not necessarily 6 of them, because the number 3 works great, as you know. So many ways to place these images, but I really wanted to play a bit around with placement. I didn't want them to be exactly in one row. I like the idea of a triangle, but this is a mini slimline, so it was a bit harder to get a really outspoken triangle here, but I really like how it is placed eventually. So I added the clouds straight on top, and then I used thin foam squares on the back of my critters so that there was a bit of dimension going on this card. Also, wherever my thin foam spheres are a bit too large, I'm just using a scissor to cut them half, or in 3 or in 4, just to make sure that everything fits on the back of my critters. I also end up actually with overlapping all of my critters with the cloud each time a little bit, to really have them more as one image even than I intended at first. So then this final one, there we go. And then we can add this panel on top of a card base. So I'm just using an adhesive roller. Then I'm lining it up as straight as possible, and then we will embellish this card a little bit further. So to finish off this card, I am going to add some glossy accents. As I said before, I'm going to add it to the glasses. This way I don't need to add any blue or another shade. I also added it on that, well, I have no clue how that's, it's not a propeller, I think, but well. And then I also ended up taking the iridescent bubbles tiny from Studio Katia, and I just added a few here and there around the sentiment, around the critters. And once I was happy with placement, I adhered them using some liquid glue, and that will be it. I contemplated about adding some glitter on the clouds, but I didn't ended up doing that. But there are many ways to recreate this card, to add other embellishments, and just have tons of fun with this adorable stamp set. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and of course that you like the end result. I had a ton of fun creating this one. So thank you so much for joining me and taking the time to watch this video. I truly appreciate you all being here, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!